I'm here with Steve Tashjian. Steve, thank you so much for your time. For the listeners at home, will you tell us a little bit about your background, your motivation, and where you are currently?
So currently I'm the head performance specialist for the U.S. men's national team. And I've taken an interesting path. I think everybody in the industry probably has a similar story, but I did my graduate work as a physical therapist in Southern California.
Mm-hmm.
And then just lucky enough, my first job out of school was working pretty closely within a soccer environment. My boss was the head of fitness for the LA Galaxy at the time. This is back in 2002. And
Mm-hmm.
Jim Liston had a facility in Pasadena, California, and I was working in the facility. So I would help him with off-season type programming. I'd see guys and help them with lifts within the facility, not necessarily on the field. And then in the afternoons, I'd be treating patients and as a physical therapist. And it gave me the opportunity to, build my skill set as a performance coach, while also working on the dynamics of being a physical therapist, a performance-based physical therapist. So that all started back 2002.
Mm-hmm.
And I started to take on, a greater role with Jim, which allowed me to have more of an insight of what it takes to get a team fit, to handle and manage the task of year-long periodization and overall player health and wellness. And that started me on my path there. And then right around 2003, 2004, I had an opportunity to start my own private practice, which I did with some friends of mine down in San Diego. And that was a great experience, understanding just learning the business side of things, but also how to manage people, and while still trying to excel as a practitioner and try to connect with a community. And it was an exciting time, and it was a growth period for me, for sure, in terms of learning a totally different skill set that would later on become really relevant especially in the man management side of things. And then from there, my connections with the LA Galaxy ended up facilitating my first role within soccer. In 2007, I became the head of fitness for the Columbus Crew, and Ziggy Schmidt had moved from the LA Galaxy to Columbus. And I had a great period with Ziggy. God rest his soul. He was a fantastic person and did so much for soccer in this country. And we were able to do some cool things together. We won some trophies, and I made some great connections with some great people. But that was a spot where, it was just me. It was just me. You had to do it all. And those roles, while you're in it, you seem like it's overwhelming, and you do more complaining than actual, praising. But in the end, it probably defines you more than any other role that I had. So you develop the skill set, and you start to kind of get some confidence in who you are and what you do. And then the opportunity came for me to go abroad in the middle of 2009. And that's when I went to England and took a sports science role with Everton Football Club. And again, it's more exposure to more people, more challenges, greater responsibility. And you just start to develop and mature as a person, as a practitioner. And it was a period where there was a lot of growth taking place, for sure. And I was able to take on different roles while I was there, and interact with some people that started to show me what now a high performance team should look like. How do you collaborate? How do you cross lines and do away with titles and just worry about roles and responsibilities within a really high performing team? And that was fantastic. And then when I came back to the States, I felt like I was fully equipped to now take on the role of, high performance director, to be an individual that oversees both medical and sports science, and be able to lead a team, build a team, lead a team. And I got that opportunity. It wasn't planned for me to come back and go back to the Crew, but while I was entertaining, what we were going to do, what direction we were going to take as a family, that opportunity popped up. And it was new ownership, new head coach, somebody who's become, a mentor, valued colleague, and a best friend, and Greg Berhalter. It's been great to take on this role and have had as long of a run as I've had with him now. 4.5 great years with him in Columbus, where I was able to, again, take on my first opportunity to be a bona fide high performance director, and then, move with him to the national team now, where I get to, again, just take on a completely different environment and a new challenge that's totally different than anything I've ever done before. And it's been exciting, and we're in a place now where I have an opportunity to do something fantastic, to take something that obviously was in a state of a low sense of confidence with the men's national team, and now see where we can go with it. Really have ambitious missions for what we want to do with this group, and it's exciting to be in that role now.
Yeah, no, that's quite a journey, and that's awesome. It's really cool to hear like how all the dots get connected, and then how it works out for where you are now. And out of all those experiences, was there any one specific experience that you think stood out the most, or were they all kind of just the next step at the time for you?
Yeah, I think if in general you'll have certain periods that were beneficial for developing a certain aspect of who you are now, not the whole, but a vital part. And if you read Robert Greene's book Mastery, he's very, very clear in outlining what I think is a very good depiction of how we all get from adolescent maturity to later stage adulthood, and in periods where we'd say we're starting to get closer to, for lack of a better word, master a certain art, so to speak. Yeah. And you just start clicking off phases. Yeah. When you complete one phase, a new one begins, and the truth of the matter is you never get to the end. You're constantly developing and honing, and as long as you put yourself in positions to be exposed to something new, it follows the same, it follows the same principles of adaptation that the body goes through. As soon as you reach threshold and you overcome it, you adapt, and you become stronger, and you become a new version of yourself. And then, the next exposure comes, and now you've got this a new challenge to help promote another skill set in yourself that maybe you did have or didn't know you had, whatever it might be. And I think that those are interesting steps. In Columbus, the first time around, man, I was young, and the maturation process was about, in any area and all areas, I was growing. Yeah. I think the one thing that I had a really good handle on that benefited that club was, I was able to bring a structured approach to how we got strong and how we got fit. Yeah. But in terms of learning how to deal with difficult personalities and the human side of being a performance coach, handling higher level organizational and planning type of decisions, how to actually mold a culture. I had no clue. No, I'd read some books, but you got to get into it to really understand what that means and how organically it changes from one day to the next. Yeah. The work to manage the culture never stops. It's daily. Something challenges it every day. And that was a part of that process early on. But I think it was that period was me molding what my personality, what my DNA was going to be as a strength and conditioning, strength and fitness coach. I already kind of knew who I was as a physical therapist. Yeah. And I did handle all the kind of middle stage to end stage rehab for the team as well. That I was totally comfortable in my own skin. But when it came to the actual periodization of an entire year, that was something I had some practical knowledge of. I was able to watch Jim do it, but it was never my responsibility. Now it's your responsibility to get a team fit. And that was great, and Ziggy was awesome because there was times when he was probably the better fitness coach in the situation. He made great decisions that probably filled in some of the gaps so that things didn't fall through the cracks. And then other times, it was me driving something that really was important for us to keep the players safe or to keep the players fit. And eventually through the good times and the conflict and the arguments, you end up molding yourself into this, you start to feel like, all right, I understand that I have a personality in this now. I know who I'm developing into. Yeah. And then Everton was much different. Everton taught me more about the marketing side of being a performance coach. Okay. Nothing was mandatory there. So it was about creating the understanding and connection, for lack of a better terms, to a startup. It was a brand. You're trying to create this product, and then you're trying to show the value of the product, and then you're trying to maintain customer satisfaction. Like I've talked about it before. There was no difference, and I'm sitting there
Yeah.
thinking, wait a minute, what do you mean you don't want to lift?
Yeah.
I came from an environment where it was just like everybody had to.
It's understood. Yeah. Uh-huh.
And now it's totally different. And then I realized that my personal connections with the player at that point was more important than any knowledge I had.
Yeah.
If they don't trust me, if they don't feel safe around me,
Yeah.
then they're not going to buy in. If they don't feel 100% that my intentions are genuine,
Yeah.
that the things I'm going to do with thought in a way that's going to support their performance on the field, you weren't going to get buy-in.
Yeah.
And that was a totally new environment. And then I had never worked with GPS before. GPS was just coming onto the scene.
Yeah.
And it was like, here, this is yours.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
And then you have to figure all that out. It's a lot of numbers. And in that period is where I developed all of my skill set in Excel. I had none whatsoever.
Yeah.
And then that developed into understanding, diving into Tableau and learning about what that was about and trying to be more technically skilled in terms of software ability and software skill sets. And that all happened at Everton. It was man management, was learning about the importance of the human side of all this while becoming really technically proficient in a new area of analytics that hadn't come into sports science yet. So, like I said, you piece it all together and all of a sudden I come back and now I feel like, I'm ready.
Yeah.
I've done all the parts. I've been a part of all the pieces and directed all these different departments. Now I feel like I have an idea. If someone said, "Here are the keys. How do you want to do it?" I would know how I want to do it.
Yeah.
And then and that was the opportunity that came when I ended up back in Columbus. So it was awesome.
That's wild. I mean, I can't think of how daunting a task it must be to have GPS and there's no one to call, no one to ask for help. Right? It's just you. It's like, maybe the manufacturer. Yeah. Like that's it.
There was very few people at the time. I'm thankful for Chris Barnes, who, let's see, where was he? At the time, I don't think he was with the club. I think he had just left the club.
Okay. It
was before he started working with West Brom.
Yeah.
And luckily he was great. He actually was unattached. He came down to the training ground and spent, more than one occasion, spent some time with me.
Oh, wow.
And then Tony Strudwick at Man United, I cold called him.
Yeah.
I didn't know who he was,
Yeah.
And I said, dude, I don't know what I'm doing here, and he was great.
Yeah.
And you end up just hopefully, finding some people who are confident enough, open and transparent enough, to have this desire to connect and help people. And I was lucky in that period to get that. And then it was just, the work on your end grind, look at the numbers, be really proficient at looking stuff up on YouTube. And, and eventually you teach yourself,
Yeah.
And then you hire somebody that's better than you. Eventually you just hire somebody that's better than you.
Right, there it is. Okay. And so you mentioned right early on some of the struggles that you had with kind of listing out that year-long annual plan, right? And so with that, where does the tactical periodization fall in? And then how does that look, right? I know there are different models. I'm most familiar with like the Dutch model, with the Portuguese model. How does that all fit into the pieces of the puzzle here?
Yeah, I think early on the popularity of the Dutch system was what really got me to start paying attention more. And this was, right around that time when I had first started working with Ziggy in 2007.
Okay.
He had a very strict way that he wanted things done.
Yeah.
And in that first year, I was trying to adapt these ideas that I had in my head that were very much influenced by the Dutch with this old school German style of fitness. And the blending of the two was a struggle, didn't work great, combined with the fact that he and I hadn't developed that trust yet to where if I said, listen, this is going to blow up, he didn't necessarily trust me yet. Yeah. Then it blew up. Yeah. And then he was like, all right, now, because sometimes I would say, hey, it's going to blow up, and it wouldn't. Yeah. And so other times, that's part of the maturation process when you're young.
Yeah.
And then at the end of that first year, I said, listen, we need to have a way that we do this. and I need to drive it or else it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And, I wanted to go abroad and do just a 2-week little sabbatical to tick a few boxes, clean a few things up. And I said, when I come back, I'll lay it out exactly the way I want to do it.
Yeah.
And, he was like, all right, let's do it. And when I came back, I had a very heavily Dutch influenced tactical periodization that I wanted to use.
Yeah.
The team and the players, I had a feel for what they needed to come up for air.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like the newness of the physical approach to what we were doing was probably going to, one, allow them to take a deep breath, feel a lot of relief and some excitement about a new direction. So I took away all running-based conditioning.
Okay.
That's how I felt it was necessary for the team to feel like we're turning a new page, because it was a team that was mired in we'll never be great because we've never been great.
Yeah.
It was, we're always fit because we're injury prone. It was like this defeating personality that the team had taken on, and we needed to do something drastic.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was what I brought forward, and he agreed, and we went at it, man. It was very, very Verheyen driven.
Yeah.
With some modifications for the areas where year-long periodization. It's not perfect when you try to just copy and paste the Verheyen method into a year-long periodization. So then, and that was the start of it for me. But you turn the page 10 years later, where I was when I started with Greg, is we started to shift things from trying to fit in every energy system every week.
Yeah.
To moving something that was much more where weeks had certain impulse themes, and that's how I periodized the year. So we would handle things in 4-week blocks.
Okay.
And the way I would look at it is that first week, the block was about speed and speed endurance.
Okay.
And as you're tactically preparing to win games, it's not perfect, but this is where Greg has been fantastic, is he would very much try to tailor the training for the week to the types of pitch conditions you need to achieve that particular impulse. So a lot of our work would be bigger fields, transition in nature. There would be space to run, space to sprint, but the exercise would provide the motivation to sprint, but the recovery you need to do it over and over again.
Yeah.
So there would be directional possessions instead of non-directional possessions, things that make you go one way. There was, instead of playing continuous games, we would try to play wave games and things that had a wave nature to it. And then that was pretty much early in the week. Once you get past Wednesday, it's about tactics. It's about preparing to win. It's the physical portion of the week that needs to be geared towards this impulse. Well, you've been on a big pitch now for a whole week.
Yeah.
The following week, now I work on things that are tighter spaces.
Okay.
So we bring the fields in tighter. We'd be more intensive in what we're doing. And the impulse, we would label the impulse for the week an intensive impulse. And now it's small-sided games. It's non-directional possessions. If you want to do your 1v1s and 2v2s and smaller game forms, this is the week where we did a lot of that. The only thing I did is once we got to Thursday of a week like that, I still wanted to at least maintain zone 5, zone 6 sprint distances. So we would do short blocks of half a dozen runs where we would make sure guys are hitting 90% of maximum velocity, and that was like our maintenance little period. That one little period where we knew we had to maintain some work, and then we'd play the game on the weekend. Well, now we've been on a tight field the whole week. So the following week, now we want to be extensive. We open the field back up. We want cardiovascular load. We want total distance. We want to produce the overload that comes with volume. And now, the games aren't wave games. They're actually straight up game form. And we base the durations and the field size on what we want from a cardiovascular standpoint. And then the fourth week is an offload. And that's how we created our own tactical periodization. We tried to understand the physical nature of how you're preparing the players. We wanted to do something new too. I just didn't feel like if we were going to be marginally different and try to find that 3% to 5% that was going to make us better, we can't do it the same way everybody else is doing it. You have to find other areas. You've got to be marginal in how you do things. And So that was one way that we found that we're going to work in the margins, is we recreated this new form of tactical periodization for ourselves.
Okay.
Now, we named it something. It might exist out there.
Yeah.
To be honest, I have no idea. To say it's new is probably, I'm probably getting ahead of myself. But in the end, that's the way we decided to do it.
Yeah.
And it was a big part of what we felt gave us success. So at that point, now you have this construct. You have an organized process, and that's what's most important.
Okay.
In tactical periodization, what's most important is you've got an identity to your team, which is heavily influenced by the style that you have as a group. Well, those two things are going to, in and of themselves, create a very unique environment for your own tactical periodization. As soon as you know those two things, you have a good grasp of the personality of your players and the makeup of the players, where's the average age, what's the general physical ability and natural physical ability of the DNA of the roster. Then you just say, okay, now we just create our process. And but once you create the process, then you drive it. It's like a brand new version 1 of software. Don't be afraid to use it. Go use it, and when you learn, then you modify it and create version 2.
Yeah.
And tactical periodization is no different. You start with your minimum viable product, and then you just use it. You get out there and you apply it, and you'll learn on the go. And then by the time you get 4 or 5 months in, you've really produced something that the players want, that the players thrive off of. Instead of spending all this time and money before the season starts creating what you think is the final product, implement it, and then saying, guys, this is what we're doing. You have to change to the program. I don't feel like that's a viable way of producing high performance. I think you go, listen, here's a great idea. Let's implement version 1 of it. And then as we get input from the players, as we see what's happening from the performances on the field, we're going to modify and make it better and better and better. Much easier way. And now the players feel like they were involved in the process of creating this plan and this piece of the puzzle that's a part of our identity. And that's kind of what we did in Columbus that time around. We created this somewhat unique periodization plan, but it was because we developed a process and we were married to the process. We didn't, the outcomes, we knew they would come. It was more about just focus on the process in and of itself, and the rest will take care of itself. Yeah, no,
I think there's a lot of value in what you said there, right? Because with these specific 2 models, right? So if we're talking about, the Portuguese model or the Dutch model, like for Verheyen, like that's what worked for him in his setting, right? And I think it's important to extract, like you said, the concept of the feedback loop, right? The autonomy of the player, all that kind of stuff, and then apply it to your specific situation, right? Just like any type of training. You can't just take a weight training program and cookie cutter it and put it in because it's different people, different needs. So I think there's huge value in that. And then on that same note, right? So I know a lot of some difficulty lies within implementing weight training specifically, right? Just because of the nature of soccer, the culture around lifting, soreness, things like that. How did that look in terms of days a week? Like when were you able to kind of fit that into the tactical scheme?
And this was the beautiful thing, man. Our high performance team had significant input into what this ended up looking like.
Okay.
And we originally had a certain, periodization in the gym that we tried to marry to this new system. And Brooke Hamilton, who was my head of strength and conditioning, said, "Listen, it's not working. We've definitely found spots where we're not making the players better, and we've got to change something." And all credit to him. He came up with what we called reverse periodization and how we applied our strength and conditioning principles to what we were doing on the field.
Okay.
So if we were, if we were on field doing speed endurance work, then in the gym would be an offload. That's when we would offload the players in the gym. The following week, when we're intensive and there's so many accelerations and decelerations taking place, then those were periods where his strategy was we were going to take away the decelerations and the eccentrics from the training session in the gym, and we're going to use techniques to really drive things more about patterning and keeping the body loose and keeping the body mobile, but Now let's use just the concentric nature of what we can do in the gym and really marry that to what we're doing on the field.
Yeah.
Then when we got to periods of extensive work where it's, really, really high volumes of, because when you're intensive on the field and you've got all these accelerations and decelerations taking place, the best thing to do is a low volume strategy in the gym.
Yeah.
And so he just went absolute strength.
Yeah.
And we lifted heavy, but very few repetitions. And that's when he went heavy.
Yeah.
On those intensive weeks, mainly because the repetitions were so low.
Yeah.
And then once we hit the extensive part of our on-field periodization, then he would just go power inside. Now it was about just body weight, speed of movement, and you can marry power to things of that nature. And then once we got to the offload on the field, that's when he did hypertrophy. So it's all on Brooke. He did a great job. He brought it. He had spelled it all out how he wanted to do it and why it made sense.
Yeah.
And it was great. But you do need to change the process.
Yeah.
We were in the gym a lot. We're a team that we facilitated the idea of what Darcy Norman calls just brushing your teeth every day. We were about little and often. Yeah. And you just get in and you brush your teeth. You get in and you brush your teeth. And that was a big part of what we did. Correctives were important. We wanted people to step on the field and feel like they were ready to train.
Yeah.
And that came off of a very, very detailed video movement screen that we did. We didn't do the functional movement screen. We created our own. And we said we have to video it. We have to be able to watch it over and over again.
Yeah.
And that the physical therapist side of me was probably what drove most of that.
Yeah.
And now you can watch it in a way where you're like right to left, posturally, we see what we need to change in this person.
Yeah.
And then that process was about individualizing what these guys do before they step on the field. And then, most of our physical work, whether it be upper body or total body combinations, happened between Monday and Wednesday. A lot of times we took midweek days off, so it'd be between Monday and Tuesday.
Okay.
And then from Thursday and Friday, it was about upper body maintenance, some power things, maintenance power work sprinkled in there, and some proprioceptive work, just gearing them towards that potentiation that's necessary to play well on Saturdays. And that's kind of how we handled the things, the weekly periodization of the gym work. But in terms of the 4-week block, that was all Brooke. I mean, he came up with a great idea, and that's what the high performance model is, man.
Yeah.
You just get a really diverse group of skilled practitioners that come together, and all of their skill sets, although they're diverse, they're relevant to each other and they fit really well. And then you do away with titles.
Yeah.
You just worry about roles and responsibilities, and then you solve problems.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter who comes up with it. Collectively as a group, you identify what the issues are, and then you let people feel like there is no bad idea. You throw it out there. And when Brooke introduced it, right off the bat, we thought it obviously makes sense that we know there's a problem.
Yeah.
And let's explore doing this in a way where you can reverse things, but still address everything.
Yeah.
And it worked great. It worked great.
Okay. And so, pulling on that thread a little bit more. So I know within the college model, right, that's kind of more where I come from. A lot of coaches will use the weight session as like a stimulus before practice. Some will do after practice depending on the time. Is there any value in doing that pre-training session in the professional model, or is it more, kind of after, strictly because it's a different setting? They're there to play soccer full time. How does that look?
I think there's a way to make it work. I do. In general, if you had your best case scenario, I would always lift first. I think but we're all going to say that we're performance coaches, right? And at the end of the day, soccer coach is going to say we do soccer first, and a performance coach is going to say we do, our lifting first. But correctives wise, I think everybody agrees. You want to be ready to train. That's not the issue. But in a scenario where we have full control, as we do with the national team, there are times when our morning session is the gym session. Okay. And then we don't train on the field until the afternoon. And that's a lot of times it's because we're trying to mitigate jet lag anyway. And a lot of these guys need to sleep in order to really get themselves adjusted to the time zone.
Yeah.
And so we'll allow them to have their period to get rest. And then the first thing we do is just to lift. And then we have lunch, things calm down, and then we go to the field. So I do think if you're trying to blend two things together, that's a great way to do it. Yeah. Now, in Columbus, it was clear. We didn't have a very long conversation about it.
Yeah.
It was, hey, Greg, how do you want to do this? And he said, I want to play soccer first.
Yeah.
So that was it.
There it is.
You know what I mean? And then you make it work. But it's fine. It's fine. I mean, it both work.
Yeah.
I think that's the key, is that I spent a lot of time early in my career when I was young banging away and arguing on things that I was so adamant about and so closed-minded about that I wasted my time. At the end of the day, it's going to work.
Yeah.
Just relax. Everything's going to be fine.
Yeah.
And you're a family of coaches together trying to, again, move the bus, hop on the bus and let it, and not try to, you don't want 5 people trying to drive the bus in different directions.
Yeah.
Now, there are times when you step in and say, listen, this isn't going to work. We have to find a solution. But when you're dealing with the human element of all of this, you also have to deal with the reality that conflict is gonna happen.
Yeah.
And how much of that do you really want? I fight the battles that I feel confident need to be fought so that we collectively all move towards our mission. Not my mission.
Yeah.
The only thing that matters is the team's mission. And if I choose to dig my heels in, it's because I'm focused on the mission, not a personal agenda.
Yeah.
But that's what gets mixed up a lot of times with the maturation process in young coaches. We're digging our heels in because we want to be right.
Yeah.
Because we want to win, because we've been oppressed under a very, difficult coach to work for, or we're in a situation where we feel like we're not heard, or we're just young and we're trying to put our stamp on a team and we don't understand the right way to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
These things are a waste of time. But while you're in it, you don't realize it. I did it.
Yeah.
I did it for years. I got into arguments with coaches that were necessary, 100%, and then I got into arguments with coaches that weren't necessary.
Yeah.
And they end up having to say, listen, Steve, stop. What I'm saying right now is I'm the head coach and this is the way we're doing it. If you get to that point in an argument that wasn't worth it, then it was a waste of time.
Yeah.
If you get to that point in an argument that was worth it, then you did your job, as long as you were doing it because you were focused on the mission of the team.
Yeah.
Not your own personal mission, to achieve your own egotistical needs. And listen, you don't even know you're doing it while you're in it. You don't realize it until you look back on it and you think, what was I doing?
And you're all caught up. Yeah.
So and so I think that's the key of it all, is it's going to work. It'll be fine.
Yeah.
If your head coach says this is the way we're doing it, then that's the way we're doing it. And you just move on, because there are ways, again, especially with this approach we came up with on reversing these periodization strategies, blending it, mending it to what's being done on the field.
Yeah.
You're going to find ways of making it really highly productive.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. No, I like that. And then moving forward just a little bit, right? I know this is not your specific area, but let's talk about nutrition a little bit, because I think you have some awesome ideas that aren't the norm. And so in terms of recommendations here, what do you have on like carb cycling? And I know you talked about being fat adaptive a little bit. We can just explore this a little bit. Yeah.
I mean, this is probably I'm less able to really implement something like this in a national team setting because one, you don't have the players long enough.
Yeah.
And two, they're coming from so many different clubs with so many different approaches to nutrition. So my ideas in this area in terms of what I think is ideal is a personal ideal. Doesn't represent what we do with the national team because it's just not feasible.
Okay.
But what I felt like was necessary, and it started while I was at Everton, is I just felt like things didn't make sense.
Yeah.
We knew the metabolic consequences of burning different macronutrients. And we've known for such a long time that the caloric output from burning a gram of fat is really powerful. And compared to carbohydrates or proteins, you can just produce so much more energy from a gram of fat. And it had already become a highly used strategy in endurance sports already. This idea of being fat adapted and the role of ketones in being highly aerobically fit was well established. Yeah. And I was in a position at the club where, you got guys that are covering between, if you include the match on the weekend, some guys are covering 45 kilometers, 50 kilometers in a week, and they're carrying extra weight. And there's some guys that are carrying extra weight because they don't take care of themselves food-wise. But there are certain guys that are following exactly what I'm asking them to do. Yeah. Exactly what our nutritionists and dietitians are asking them to do. And they're still carrying like 2-3 kilos of weight that they shouldn't have. Yeah. And then I'm hearing things like, this guy will never be 90 minutes fit. He's a sprinter. He's got that fiber type. He'll never be 90 minutes fit. And that just doesn't fit with human physiology. We're an organism that adapts to overload. Yeah. There are ceilings. Don't get me wrong. I think there are genetically driven ceilings that the human potential has. Agreed. Yeah. But look at the way that human nature is. Nobody thought that we'd ever break the 4-minute mile, and we did it. Yeah. And then, Landry tried to do it for years. Roger Bannister does it, and then 2 weeks later, all of a sudden, Landry does it. Yeah. Right. But he tried for 2 years and couldn't break 4 minutes. Yeah. He was quoted as saying, "It's a brick wall. Yeah. It's a brick wall that I can't penetrate." He'd get to 4 minutes and 1 second and couldn't break it. All of a sudden, Roger Bannister does it, and 2 weeks later, so does Landry.
Now it's done. Yeah.
So, human potential, we can't place limits on this stuff. The 2-hour marathon's been broken, right? It wasn't official, and it hasn't been recorded as an official marathon, but somebody's done it, know. And once we got to the world record at 2 hours, 3 minutes, nobody ever thought we'd get there ever, and we did. So I think you end up breaking these stereotypes all the time. There was research done that the ideal 100-meter sprinter should be between 5'9" and 6'2". Here comes Usain Bolt, who's 6'5". He looks more like a basketball player than a sprinter. And he violates everything that we said was ideal for a sprinter. And then when he breaks the world record, he broke it, and he actually slowed down the last 10 meters. Studies were done that if he wouldn't have slowed down, he would have done a 9.55 instead of a 9.69 or whatever it was. So we can try to say that there's these ceilings on human potential, but I don't think I think we put the ceiling in place too early. Yeah. And I felt the same way with these players. I was like, there's got to be a way. So if they're not aerobically fit enough to play 90 minutes, then we got to find a way to make them more aerobically fit. Yeah. And exactly. So I started looking at this idea, and there's so many myths in place. If you don't have carbohydrates, you can't produce power. And to a certain extent, let me make myself clear. Carbohydrates are essential in the nutritional needs of a soccer player. Yeah. Essential. We just don't need anywhere near as much as we've been told we need. And then once you strip that away and you just accept that as truth, what ends up happening is during periods of the week, during periods of the year, you can actually take advantage of what happens when you train without carbohydrates in your system. Okay. Now you become fat adapted, and you've got this human body that knows how to use ketones as fuel. I'm not talking about ketosis. I'm not talking about a ketogenic diet. That gets misconstrued. A lot of people think what I drive is a ketogenic diet in soccer. Let me just say now, that is 100% inaccurate. That is not what I drive. Yeah. I drive a carbohydrate periodization model. Just like any periodization, even in the gym, what do? We increase loads and take away loads to allow somebody to peak. That's all we're doing with carbs. You're bringing in carbs and taking away carbs to allow somebody to peak. That's it. Yeah. And once you do it right, you actually create an athlete that knows how to metabolize fat at a greater extent than the person they're competing against across from them. So now what's taking place? One, I'm glycogen sparing.
Yeah.
I don't actually have to have as many carbohydrates in my body on match day, in which everybody knows if you talk to any soccer player, they don't like smashing 400 grams of carbohydrates in their body on match day.
Yeah.
They're heavy, they're bloated, they feel like crap, their stomach and digestion is all over the place. And you're just imbibing all this external inflammatory, excess water into the body through a carbohydrate molecule. It makes it really difficult. And I think at times we're so married to this idea, and a lot of it's driven by fear, that we were afraid to try something new.
Yeah.
And in the end, what ended up happening with a small group of guys that I was allowed to work with the under 21s is all these guys that people said couldn't finish 90 minutes, we changed them as athletes.
Yeah.
They were totally different athletes. There's certain body composition changes that are going to take place no matter what.
Yeah.
That's just a fact of life. And all of it was obviously for the better for this group. And then slowly but surely, once you have more oxygen available in the body, most metabolic processes need oxygen.
Yeah.
Including the process of resynthesizing energy like creatine phosphate and ATP, which is highly necessary to sprint. All of a sudden, you've got this reserve of O2 molecules in the body that are readily available to help with these metabolic processes. And I think it's the reason why we saw increases in repeated sprintability as well. Yeah. Nobody lost top speed.
Yeah.
We did testing. Nobody lost top speed. Matter of fact, in the testing we did in Columbus over a 3-year period, guys continued to get faster. So they didn't lose agility, and none of our agility scores dropped. None of our speed scores dropped. It was what it was. Once we got past the first year, we realized none of these myths are true. We made some mistakes. We changed the way we did it so that would be better for the players. What we ended up learning is guys actually felt better with less carbohydrates in their body. And that's not me. That's coming from the players, guys. That's just the way it is. I had players where I would be on the road trip watching them eat their pre-match meal. And I actually sat down next to a guy and said, listen, I don't think you're eating enough carbohydrates.
Yeah.
And he said, I feel better without them. I said, listen, this is unprecedented. I don't know how to help you.
Yeah.
Because I don't, based on what you have on your plate, my suggestion would be to have more.
Yeah.
He's like, well, I'm asking you to trust me.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I guess there's only one way to know whether this is right or wrong. He said, let's do it. And the guy's never stopped.
Yeah.
He produces 12 and a half, 13 kilometer performances every weekend.
Wow.
And so in general, my point is this. We had great physical numbers. And for the years that we were tracking it league wide, we didn't have, for the years that we had league data, not just our own, but the entire league's data, which was 3 out of the 4.5 years I was there.
Okay.
We led the league in total distance covered, high speed running covered throughout the league.
Yeah.
So let's say we didn't lead the league. Let's say we were third. I guess my argument is, but yeah, you guys said we couldn't do it.
Yeah.
There was this fear that if you do it this way, you're going to get to a certain point in the game, and then your skeletal system is just going to crumble to the ground like a bag of bones, right? There was this fear that you can't do it. You're just going to collapse, right? There's going to be, and we're like, that's not human physiology. It doesn't work like that, guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
So in general, even if our numbers were totally unchanged, 2014, I wasn't with the club.
Yeah.
You take the numbers in 2014 and 2015, 2014 and compared to 2017, which I think was our fittest team. Let's say those two groups were identical. The point is, but you said it couldn't be done. So it's not about whether it's better, whether it's worse. I think it's better. But the key is it's totally evident that it's possible.
Yeah.
And that's what I want to drive. It's an example of not what I care to promote globally. I don't care to promote diet nutrition globally.
Yeah.
I'm not a dietitian. What I care to promote is to do away with groupthink. Stop doing what you're doing because everybody else is doing it.
Yeah.
be courageous and try something new, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's needed. And listen, we might have fallen flat on our face.
Yeah.
And if we did, we would have gone back to the conventional model.
Yeah.
We're not going to drive something home because our mission is to make the players better. This wasn't about me. The mission was clear from Greg.
Yeah.
We want to be marginally different.
Yeah.
It was my job to be marginally different.
Yeah.
He was very clear in that. Don't do what everybody else does. I want you to be different. Well, I've been told that's my mission.
Yeah.
It's not about ego. It was about the mission. And if it would have failed, it would have failed in practicality, but it would not have failed in application.
Yeah.
Because that was our job. And so at that point, that's really what it represented for me. Our periodization model represented that for me. The way we screened and evaluated movement was achieved that goal for me. And what we tried to do nutritionally, achieved that goal for me. And that's all it was. So overall, what I'd say is, the fat adapted athlete is a player in soccer, 100%. We know that now. And the data we have from the 4.5 years, you can't refute that it doesn't work. What you can refute is maybe there's a better way.
Yeah.
Sure. Because, again, we're going to evolve over time in the world of diet and nutrition. The next new great thing is on the horizon. Who knows what it is?
Yeah.
I think it's going to be studying the gut. I think it's going to be the gut biome and understanding genetically what's happening and bacteria-wise what's happening within the gut. I think that's going to be the next wave of it. Identifying individual specific diets for people based on their gut biome is going to be it, I think.
Yeah.
And as you start to move towards that, great. But what is it really about? It's about this idea of breaking groupthink. Stop doing what you're doing because everybody else is doing it. And ask the question of yourself in everything you do. Why am I doing this?
Yeah.
Why am I doing the functional movement screen? Why am I using the Dutch method of tactical periodization?
Yeah.
Everything needs to be questioned. And I think at that point, you start to develop the understanding of why I ended up in this area as a physical therapist / performance director.
Yeah.
So heavily, involved in a dietary plan,
Yeah.
But luckily I had great people around me.
Yeah.
I had really smart dietitians that guided all of it. I'm not telling people what to eat.
Yeah.
I'm having professionals that are much smarter than me telling me what they should be eating, and that's how we produced it together as a group. So overall, that's where it evolved to, and that's why it was put in place. It achieved a greater mission of ours, which was to be different, find marginal ways of being better, and trying to win games without spending millions of dollars on players, but instead by making the players we have better. And that's that fell into that category for sure.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I mean, what a great environment that you can be in where your coach is driving, novelty thinking, right? And not novelty for novelty's sake, but novelty for, for change and for improvement. And so that's, a testament, I think, to your whole organization there. And so that's fantastic to hear.
Yeah,
and then,
for sure.
Kind of moving forward with that, in terms of, we talked about nutrition, we talked a little bit about tactical periodization. Were you guys doing anything different, or are you guys doing anything different in terms of recovery or in that field?
Man, I tell you what, this is going to be an interesting one because you really start to examine is recovery a central phenomenon, or is it a peripheral phenomenon, or is it a combination of the two?
Yeah.
And that's probably where we did a majority of our work in this area, was deciding where we were going to land in all of that. Yeah. And there's a great book that influenced a lot of what I do here by a psychologist named David Grand, who wrote the book Brain Spotting.
Okay.
The nuts and bolts of it, at least a section of it that really, hit home with me with recovery, was he discovered how you can have a direct influence on the autonomic nervous system by using different stimuli to the senses, mainly visual and auditory.
Okay.
So I said, all right, well, we all know that we want to recover parasympathetic tone when we're going through the recovery process. Well, here's a guy that's literally showing us through his research that he can directly affect parasympathetic tone.
Interesting. Okay.
And the way he was doing it in his sessions. And why does a psychologist need to do it? A psychologist needs to do it because when you increase parasympathetic tone, you calm down the amygdala,
Mm-hmm.
And when you calm down the amygdala, a psychologist can really access deeper memories, more authentic memories,
Yeah.
more subconscious memories that allow him to help patients process
Yeah.
through different traumas.
Mm-hmm.
Well, two ways that he did it. Early on, he did it through oscillating auditory stimuli from one ear to the other.
Mm.
And as you bounce stimuli from one ear to the other, you're also bouncing stimuli from one hemisphere of the brain to the other. And when you oscillate stimuli back and forth between both hemispheres,
Mm-hmm.
it has this direct effect on the vagal nerve and parasympathetic tone.
Okay.
Well, in the end, he started to see that he had better results when he started to use the visual system instead.
Mm.
So he would use a pointer and he would oscillate it back and forth, or he would find a spot in the visual field and he would freeze the pointer in that visual field, hence the name brain spotting. So that's where the book went. But for me, the thing that was so attractive was this direct effect on parasympathetic tone.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, this idea of oscillation became really important to me.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a great example of it was, we had a few guys with serious concussions one year.
Yeah.
And something you get in concussions with certain guys is high sympathetic tone.
Okay.
You get this sympathetic reaction to activity.
Mm-hmm.
And we had one particular athlete where anytime he started any aerobic activity whatsoever, his heart rate would jump to 190 beats per minute, 200 beats per minute. He'd start getting headaches and he just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Well, I said, listen, let's try this, man. So I ended up buying David Grann's CD called Bilateral Sound.
Mm-hmm.
And we threw the kid on a bike with a heart rate belt and a watch.
Mm-hmm.
We blindfolded him so that he didn't have any visual stimuli. And then we had him start riding the bike. Mm-hmm. We saw this sympathetic tone start to increase, his beats per minute increasing. And then we threw the headphones on him and started playing Bilateral Sound. Mm-hmm. We literally watched his heart rate dropping.
Simply from the auditory stimulus?
That was it.
Wow.
He was blindfolded.
Okay.
And so we're like, holy crap. Like, this is obviously something we can... Now, there was no permanent effects because you take the headphones off and his heart rate would jump again.
Yeah.
But it was clear that we could affect parasympathetic tone. Mm-hmm. So now the question is, when you're doing a recovery session, would you rather have your athlete on a bike or an elliptical? Which one oscillates? Mm-hmm. It was clear to me. I said, we're going to ellipticals.
Yeah.
Did I have science to back it up? No. But we need it to be different. Yeah. We need to do something different. Mm-hmm. Well, but what we realized is we can affect parasympathetic tone at a greater extent than we thought.
Yeah.
And we were already using omega wave and heart rate variability testing with our players. Mm-hmm. So we just needed to look at it at a greater extent. If we want to affect parasympathetic tone, how do we do it?
Yeah.
There's cryo modalities that'll help you. There's floating modalities that'll help you. There's these oscillatory ways of bringing not only bilateral sound, which sometimes we just said, guys, based on your scores, I just want you to sit and listen to bilateral sound for 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. And we would do that. Guys would just be sitting in their locker, headphones on, because you can download it from iTunes. Mm-hmm. And that was part of their correctives for the day. It was a recovery day anyway. Yeah. Your sympathetic tone is too high. Mm-hmm. And that's what we would do.
Yeah.
And so now all of a sudden it becomes, okay, is it more important for that guy to foam roll? Mm-hmm. Or is it more important for that guy to address their central fatigue? So those are the things that changed for us in terms of recovery.
Okay.
And every morning, if we had Sunday off after a game and their first day was Monday morning, we went straight to their HRV scores. Mm-hmm. And based on their HRV scores, we had a central nervous system strategy for them. We had a peripheral strategy for them. And if they were high sympathetic tone, then they had a parasympathetic strategy for their central strategy. Okay. And then they obviously still did their peripheral stuff.
Yeah.
If they had high parasympathetic tone, which is also possible, mm-hmm. then we had a strategy to balance it a bit.
Okay.
And we needed to bring some sympathetic tone back into it.
Yeah.
Because we don't want them to be in this lethargic state either. Yeah. Because you can be overly parasympathetic also. It's rare, but you can have it.
Okay.
So in the end, that's how we started to change things. So if a guy had really high sympathetic tone, I wasn't going to put him on a bike.
Yeah.
I was going to put him on an elliptical. Mm-hmm. That's where the difference is.
Okay.
And we weren't going to do intervals.
Yeah.
Right? We were going to do very slow, very low level, but very oscillating. And then we wouldn't let them listen to whatever music they wanted.
Mm-hmm.
We would throw bilateral sound on them, or we would use classical music that was really calming, really low level. Like these things are all important. So understanding one, centrally, there's a huge role in fatigue that comes centrally. And I think, in my opinion, fatigue is a greater central phenomenon than a peripheral phenomenon.
Yeah, agreed.
So I will always gravitate towards the central phenomenon. And then almost all of our guys floated.
Okay.
We started using flotation therapy.
Yeah.
Within, I looked at it for 2 months, and within 2 months, I thought, that's it. We have to be doing this. We partnered with a third-party provider for that. And guys on their way home, they would do all the recovery strategies at the training ground. On their way home, we'd set up appointments. They'd go visit these 2 locations that were set up in Columbus. They would do their thing, and then they'd go home. They were done, and that was their day. But we were addressing the fact that fatigue and recovery doesn't just need one peripheral strategy. It needs a central strategy, a very structured, directed, purposeful central strategy.
Okay. And so on that sympathetic, balancing out the parasympathetic system, what did that kind of protocol look like to apply some more sympathetic tone?
If you needed to be more sympathetic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So if you were really highly parasympathetic, which is rare, but you'll see it, then we would actually put them on the bike rather than the elliptical.
Gotcha. And
we would do sub-maximal intervals.
Okay.
We would actually bring little spikes in activity.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It was still longer periods of rest than it was periods of work.
Yeah. And
we would not let them use the ice bath.
Okay.
What we've seen is the ice bath has a very strong parasympathetic effect when you get out.
Yeah.
So it was clear for us to not give them any ice bath that day. We might do it the next day.
Yeah.
But it was clear that we wanted, and then on those guys, it's actually shown that if you do really deep massage, you'll create a sympathetic reaction.
Okay.
So we would allow them to have their deep tissue stuff that day.
Yeah.
We would do the intervals on the bike. They'd still foam roll. They'd still move their joints. They'd still do a movement-based recovery strategy, get their joints recovered, their peripherals recovered.
Yeah.
But we would do intervals on the bike rather than letting them do this elliptical-based, low-level, continuous strategy.
Gotcha. So simple.
Yeah. So they're
so effective. Right? So
I mean,
sorry, go ahead.
You need to spike the system. You need to spike the system to really engage. The way it works in that particular case is you're just trying to shut off the vagal nerve.
Yeah.
And then allow the sympathetic tone to return.
That's fantastic. I love it. Okay. And then, last kind of question on this thing, this has been all fantastic, but if someone wants to reach out to you and kind of follow the journey, what's the best way to do so?
I think the 2 best ways are either Twitter or LinkedIn.
Okay.
You can find me pretty easy on LinkedIn, Steve Tashjian in the search window. I'm pretty sure there's not a ton of Steve Tashjians out there. So.
All right. Yeah.
With that funky last name, I'm sure you'll find me. And then the other way is on Twitter is @Steve Tashjian.
Okay.
And I really enjoy, when these podcasts are finished, I do enjoy the questions that flood the inbox when they're finished. I do my best to get to all of them. Mm-hmm. Now I really don't have an excuse. There's a lot of downtime, so I'll probably get to all of them.
Okay.
But that's the best way. That's the best way to get a hold of me.
Fantastic. Well, Steve, thank you so much for your time. This has been hugely insightful. I love the things you're doing, the innovation that you're applying, and the innovation for the purpose of, improving and, winning games and just, meeting that main goal, right? Not for your own sake, but for the team's sake. I love it. I love it. So once again, thank you so much for your time, and hopefully we can connect again soon in the future.
No worries, man. Thanks for having me. Let's do it again.